I'm going to share the story basically of how a hashtag came to define me. I never imagined 10 years ago that Conf would actually take care of every single workday and sometimes even weekends for about 10 years so far. But first I'll tell you what Brand New Conference stands for. It's a 2-day event organized by Under Consideration on corporate and brand identity. Now, the first question is, who the heck is Under Consideration? That would be a team of 2. My husband, Armin Witt, and myself. That's it. There's nobody else involved. We work from home. We roll out of bed at 5 a.m. every single morning, go down to work, and eventually wake up kids and send them to school and do all of those things. But this is the essence of the team. Because throughout the years, we've realized that actually finding people who work with us is really, really hard. And what is it that we do? We do pretty much anything that is under consideration. We came up with this name back in 2000, 1999, 2000, as a way of saying, we'll just do whatever we want to do. And eventually we'll have a design firm and we'll have employees. And now none of that really happened, but for reasons that I'm going to explain. So we're based in Bloomington, Indiana. But it really all started in 1998 when we left Mexico City and we moved to Atlanta so that I would go to school. And from there, we moved here. We were here for 5 years. And it was during a very cold winter that we started Speak Up. That was the first design blog that came out, and long before Design Observer and all the others. And there was a lot of discussions about graphic design. But after about 10 years, we archived everything because it started to get a little repetitive and we were ready to move on to something else. But during this process, in 2003, UPS decided to rebrand. And they were messing with a logo created by one of the design icons. So this caused an uproar in the design community. And it was a defining moment for us because a lot of people were like, you shouldn't be covering this. That is, it's non-consequential for design. And others loved it. So we started a blog named Brand New, which focused entirely on the before and after of a brand. And we would do a lot of research. You can see here, Uber just rebranded. And so we get as much information as we can. We publish this every single day by 6 a.m., which that way everybody around the world can see it either before leaving work or when they first show at work or during their lunch break. And it has become like its own entity. We have over 2 million unique visitors a month. So we had this really awesome community. Throughout everything that we've done after being here, we moved to New York and we've done a lot of projects. We've done awards, we've done events. I mean, Laura back there, I think our first event was about 15 years ago. I've had designers present in my living room floor, kind of between cats and posters and samples and stuff like that. So everything that we do really is centered around graphic designers. With Brand New, we started to go more towards branding designers. Throughout this, we also moved to Austin. Now, I think this is a quote that kind of explains our next step, because when we moved to Austin, it was 2009. The economy tanked. All the clients dried up. Nobody was hiring graphic designers. Everything could wait. That website could last another year. The logo did not need to be redone until the economy picked up. And we realized we were in a pickle. And so we literally put our life savings into this idea that we had 10 years prior to host a conference. And we decided to do it on branding because it was something that we knew a lot about. And it was a bit of a niche thing. When we had the idea originally, somebody mentioned, insurance, and we completely froze. But at this point, we're like, you know what? We're just going to have to bite the bullet and go for it. So I maxed out just about every credit card I owned, and I even got more in order to make this happen because we were using Eventbrite, and back then Eventbrite did not give you the money from the tickets until the day after the event. So I saw all these ticket sales adding up on one end, but I could not access any of that money. So I needed to buy the t-shirts, I needed to order all of the supplies and everything. So that was a very stressful event, but we figured, if we can make it work this year, maybe we're on to something. And the nice challenge that we have is that we're branding for branding designers, which means we can push the boundaries of legibility, of color, of all of the different things. So in that first year, in 2010, we focused on kind of like this fun idea of this tote is brand new, picking up from the blog. And so everything was brand new. One of the things that we made clear from the very beginning was that the program needed to be a keepsake. I don't want to find all of these materials in the hotel trash or in the venue's trash. So the program becomes kind of a portfolio of all of these people that are presenting, as well as case studies from the sponsors. That first event was amazing. We sold out in like 3 weeks. People were actually interested in this. And we obviously learned a lot, but everything went through without a hitch. And we're like, okay, this worked. We can do this again. There is no problem. But there are some things about risk that are not for everybody. But we've learned that the higher the risk, the higher the payoff. Especially if you've calculated. You know, we knew we had a good audience. We knew that if we did it in New York, even though New York is somewhat expensive, there's a great pool of designers there. Nobody needed to really travel. We could gather enough people from there. And you know, even if your parents think that this is the stupidest thing that you've ever done, you know, you just have to follow your gut. So the next year we went to San Francisco. We went, you know, one coast to the other coast. We were flying high. And that year kind of brought us down to the ground. So we had this whole idea about sign painting, and we had somebody do it. And it was a bit of a stressful process because they would send us the rolls of stuff and they were stuck together because they rolled it before the paint dried. But we were using the price point of all of the materials as kind of the takeaway. And once again, that program became a keepsake. And we heard great feedback about that. You know, people were actually starting to keep this. At this point, we're not focusing too much on the badges, but you know, we're having fun with the branding and the challenge of branding for designers. One thing that we learned is that people in California buy their tickets towards the end. And so that was a little stressful because 2 weeks prior to the event, we were like, okay, I don't remember the exact numbers now, but we have 400 tickets, so let's order the t-shirts, the programs, and in the next 2 weeks, we sold 300 tickets. You're like, okay, how are we gonna make this happen? You know, and so it was a learning experience in that regards, and we also learned a lot about unions. We have not been back to San Francisco. I am going back next year with another event. But we doubted ourselves a lot, and that is something that, you know, pushes you and to question everything and to try to answer as many questions as you have ahead of time. And you know, when you're questioning things, you just have to work harder to prove it. We went back to New York, common ground, that felt good to us. We had a lot of fun ripping logos apart to create these patterns out of like the leaf of the Apple logo and the arrow from the FedEx logo. That way we would not have any issues with copyright infringement. And we started to work with sponsors in order to create the materials. And so we were working with newsprint in England, and we started to kind of up the ante on our print stuff. So we're using foils and all kinds of fun stuff. That one was an oversized program. We learned it's a little cumbersome when you're sitting in a tight theater. But again, you know, people are starting to respond to all of these things that we're doing, and they like the structure that we're implementing. It's just the two of us. We introduce, we question the presenters, and we walk off stage and bring out the next one. So there's a very clear and simple formula to the event that people are starting to expect because people keep coming back. It's a very tight-knit family. So yes, designing for designers is as dangerous as it sounds in the sense that you will get butchered. It's a group of people that can spend weeks, if not months, obsessing over the distance between two letters. Kerning entire annual reports and books and stuff like that. So it's a very critical audience. But you know, when you make them smile, when you make them happy, it's very rewarding. The following year, we stayed back in New York and pushed the ante a little bit more. We started to create custom badges. No more lanyards that you bought online. No more, you know, plastic sleeves, anything like that. We had these made. And we were using these die cuts, and the printer did all of these little dots on the covers. You can see that the logo moves around on these covers. That's because I embroidered 800 logos onto the covers. Is that working? Yeah. And that was a clear, defining moment for us because all of a sudden, really, nobody could put that in the trash, at least not in front of me. When they saw that I would just put on my headphones. Mumford & Sons has the best tempo for any kind of production of this sort. I can tell you, it works year after year. I also realized I wanted white paper bags for the goodies, but I could not find any white paper bags with yellow handles. So my neighbors got to know about the brand new conference because my entire yard was covered in paper bags dripping yellow paint. And it's the first year we introduced a podium wrap. All of a sudden, all of the photos that are starting to pick up more and more on social media are branded. So we're starting to push the boundaries of how to brand the conference and how to brand it beyond the event. So people start to share their badges and things like that. So putting in the sweat and the hours after putting my kids to sleep, just embroidering, it's completely worth it. There's a sense of awe coming from the audience and the people who are attending. And you get to learn new skills. So that's kind of nice. Well, and then my kids enjoy certain perks that come along with it. The following year, we took a big leap. We moved the conference to Chicago, and in taking feedback from our audience, we grew to 2 days. Now, that in our heads was double the expense, basically. And we figured, okay, if we duplicate the price of the ticket, that's not going to fly. And it kind of goes against everything that we do, because we try to keep those prices as affordable as possible. So what we did was we got a bigger theater and said, okay, double the amount of presenters, double the amount of attendees, please. And it actually worked. So with this one, we had a lot of fun taking cues from the Broadway show and the Typeface Chicago, and started to produce all of these materials and kind of stepped up the ante again. We got these fabric, we custom made fabric through one of our sponsors. All of the programs had these little stickers that completed the patterns that our volunteers set up on the day before. And the badges became this enormous task with 7 layers of process that required many, many hours on my kitchen counter of cutting the ribbons, finding a curvy blade, all of these little details that, again, start to create a process for me in I start to recognize the names and the companies that are coming year after year, and I can notice who's missing or who's adding more employees. I can see a lot of growth through there. And it also is a year where we stepped up on stage. We created these acrylic letters that covered the entire stage. That became the coveted thing, and everybody was swarming at the end of the event trying to get the letters. And that kind of started a tradition that whatever we put up on stage, there's some kind of hustle towards the end of who's going to take them home, somewhere between the audience and the volunteers. So that was a really, really scary year for us. It was, in a way, scarier than inaugurating the event. Again, this is just Armin and myself. We don't involve anybody else. We've figured out that, while collaboration and delegation works for a lot of people, for us, it works against us. I can look at him across the theater and he knows exactly what's happening outside and what he needs to handle inside while I go deal with any little fires that are happening. So the fear of failure is our greatest motivator, not only to fail for ourselves, but to fail towards other people, to fail our audience or our speakers. So that is the biggest drive that we have. In 2015, we kind of lost it. We lost all sense of reason. As we keep pushing the boundaries of our branding, we picked up on New York graffiti and kind of like the idea of the 1%, which was going around back then, with these monogrammed golden letters in gold foil. A normal designer creates a stencil, spray paints it, scans it, and takes it, adds it to the file, sends it to the printer, and gets it back. We spray painted 2,000 covers in our backyard in Austin on the 4th of July weekend. Talk about a sunburn. And after a lot of working with the foil stamper, we figured every cover needed to be layered with Tresemme hairspray and wood spray, or the foil stamp would not adhere properly. So there was a lot of trial and error. For the badges, we created wood badges. Now, I would spray paint a larger piece, and I wanted to outsource somebody who would cut them. The best quote that I had was for $2,000. Figured, okay, it's time to go to Home Depot and learn a new skill. So I bought myself a $300 machine that I have now, used for other stuff, and I learned how to cut little pieces of wood. So we were slowly taking ownership of all of these materials. The bags that year were white, and they all had to be spray painted as well. Now, so the paint wouldn't go from one side to the other. Is this playing? Sorry. They had to be inserted somehow. That one is not, there we go. Inserted on a cardboard piece so that, it would be protected. And a lot of trial and error as well. And all of the bags had this glossy, horrible string. So I took it all out. I bought massive amounts of neon paracord that I cut and burned the edges of and reinserted them into the bags. So my kids' school art department got a lot of glossy white ribbons that I don't know what they've done with them, but they accepted them. So at least, they didn't go straight into the landfill. But that makes it worth it for me, because then as all of this neon thing and spray painting linens and everything starts to take shape, it really stands out to the audience. And they're like, wait a minute, you spray painted this one? There was even a couple of covers that I'm pretty sure had a bug attached to it. And I figured, okay, if anybody finds a bug, I'll give you $100 off for next year. Nobody actually claimed it. But it was the first year where social media really took off with our materials. We have never advertised the conference. This is all word of mouth, or people tweeting and Instagramming all of the materials and kind of aiming to make other people jealous, which I'm okay with. So a little OCD goes a long way. It has a bad rep, but I have fully embraced it and it works for us. I have spent way too many hours shopping online, finding the outfits that match the branding. Laura can attest to that. And blowing this production completely out of proportion has completely changed the game for us. So all of those hours that we put in are completely worth it. So the next year, we decided to test our audience a little bit. Will you go to a city where most of you will have to travel? We are not counting on a large pool of designers in New York or San Francisco or Chicago, but can we get you all to go somewhere else? And we did. So that was an eye-opener for us. Okay, we have this solid base, and we had a lot of fun tapping into the Nashville look and feel with crazy patterns, with rhinestones, with records. We scoured all of the Austin records for old records that were not moldy, preferably. It's amazing how many records are actually moldy. And spent a lot of time after they had been silk screened cutting them. It's not easy to cut records. You have to snap them. And drilling them and putting them together so that we would create all of these custom badges. Now, all of these videos are a little longer because we use them for the branding presentation each year. So I keep cutting them short. We had 6 different covers that Classic Color here in Chicago printed for us. And you can see a little bit of sparkle there is because our volunteers the day before put 7 rhinestones per cover. That takes a lot longer than anybody can possibly imagine. It was a hard lesson. We were scrambling towards the end, trying to see, okay, if you get an iron, does that make it go faster? No, yes, trying to find alternatives. But again, adding that sense of wonder and tactile feeling to the covers was a moment of awe for our audience. And then there was these giant 4-foot letters that I made out of wood that we wanted to bring that into the stage with a handmade element. So these took over my kitchen counter. It had a fairly small area, maybe like 4 of these little tables next to the stove. So dinner was either happening or painting was happening. We added little holes so that we would put Christmas lights in there, and had to trace all of the patterns onto the wood, and spent hours and hours painting all of these patterns and obsessing over the Christmas lights. We would dip them in white paint. Is that too dim? We would scratch them a little bit until we found the exact balance that we wanted in order to create that rhinestone costume effect. The venue was amazing. It was at the Nashville Symphony. So it's hard to top a beautiful old style courtyard. And it was a moment of kind of deep growth for us in believing in ourselves. So far we seem to be always winging it, and that's kind of the way we roll, and we try to do things as best as we can. But the fact that people did travel and the conference was again sold out told us that we were doing something right. So adding a little spark and wonder to the event is a beautiful thing, and it makes people smile. Last year was a bit challenging. We went back to Chicago and got inspired by the Cloud Gate. Now, we knew we were moving. We didn't know where we were moving. We opened Google Maps and tried to figure it out. And we didn't know when or how. So we tried to do a lot of it ahead of time. So we were trying to figure out how to get reflective materials to work for us, to create different patterns and distortions of the typography. We researched a lot of reflective and shiny materials. It's amazing. Don't go to asos.com and look reflective clothing, because you will be scarred for life. You can go head to toe, really. It was time to learn a new skill, because these little Mylar bags, nobody wanted to silk screen on for us, because Mylar does not absorb ink. So it needed to be a fairly toxic ink that goes on it. And being a very small and kind of movable material, it's not cost effective for anybody to take on the job. So I got myself a silk screening kit online, and we learned how to silk screen. Now, we needed about 1,000 of these. I ended up doing closer to 3,000 because a lot of them sucked. But it's part of the process of learning how to do something. There we go. And it was very rewarding, and now we actually have a little silk screen station that we can do little things here and there. Once again, we worked with Classic Color to create this beautiful program that opens, and it's kind of like a mirror. You go backwards for the Thursday schedule and speakers and case studies, and forward for the Friday information. And we went through maybe, I think, 6 boxes of black latex gloves with the volunteers as they were assembling all of the goodie bags and everything. Because even though you can wipe the fingerprints fairly easily, you don't want to spend time wiping. And you wanted to give all of these nice elements to the attendees. And once again, we built letters that flew. I don't even know how quickly they went after the event. So reflection. Moving across the country does not cut you any slack. You still have to produce all of these materials and excel and really stand out. And if you get new toys that you can play with after, I find it is a win-win situation. And this year actually, 2 weeks ago, we kind of blew it out of proportion. We went back to New York, otherwise known as a concrete jungle. So I bought 3,000 pounds of concrete. I learned how to make molds, and I figured I could put a slab of concrete onto the program. Figuring out, you cannot make it 1/8 of an inch because it will crack. 1/4 of an inch is just about right. It makes it heavy, but then you don't have to add a mesh or anything like that. Figuring out what kind of glue to use for all of this, I ended up using vinyl flooring glue after a lot of tests. And since March, sorry, this went forward. Is that playing? I can't see. Oh, there we go. Since March, 6 days a week for about 3 hours a day, this is what I did. I poured and mixed and figured out concrete nonstop in order to create about 3,000, or a little over 3,000 pieces of concrete for our attendees, for their badges, for their programs, and a little cube, kind of like a paperweight. Everything needed to be cured for 24 hours. It needed to be demolded, sanded, washed, left underwater for 24 hours, eventually glued. And the main thing for us that was scary is like, okay, you have 2 tons of materials now. I'm going to put that in UPS and pay a fortune and hope nothing breaks. Well, no, I'm going to drive to New York. And so Arvin and I rented 2 minivans because one would not handle the weight, and drove for 14 hours following each other, and got to New York and put it all together. knowing that the program was a tiny bit cumbersome and it was wrapped in a way that was super protected for shipping, for transportation and all of that, we printed the schedule onto the tote bag itself. And that made it a little bit more accessible. The letters did not fly off the shelf this year. Everybody thought they were actually made of concrete. They're actually made out of foam. But usually when the last speaker goes on and we're done, I dash out to the after party so that I'm the first one there. And that's when the madness happens with the letters. And the next day I show up to pick up our leftover stuff and the letters are still there. I'm like, what happened? Well, everybody figured I am not going to carry that home. They were very nicely done by the local prop shop of the theater in Bloomington. So this is what the programs look like. Everybody was enjoying it and kind of incredulous at the fact that there was actually a piece of concrete slapped onto the book. Every single cover is different. I discovered that concrete is extremely moody. If it's 5 degrees warmer, it will turn bluish. If the humidity changes, it will give you a white film on the back. Little things like that, but that make it really special. Each one is slightly imperfect. And the badges. Again, I keep avoiding lanyards like crazy, so I cut these ribbons and I ended up gluing them inside the badge so there's no seams, there's nothing that snags at your clothes or anything like that. We made these little cubes for everybody. And once more, you know, social media takes over our advertising with everybody posting all of these things. Go on. I think we'll have one more. Maybe. All right, give it just a second. You know, so yes, I'm a little bit crazy about making all of these things, and this year I did question my sanity, and I still do. But when I see how people are reacting to the materials and what they're saying and how they're commenting about it with their friends and everybody around them, it is absolutely worth it. It's like childbirth. I completely forget about the pain that it was, all the blisters, all the achy muscles, the pulled back, all of that goes away the moment I see somebody like stuck in just looking at this program. How the heck did this come to be? So when you think you've topped it, and it cannot be topped, it definitely can. You know, after the spray paint, everybody's like, you're never going to top this. And this year they all came up and said, you actually did. I don't know how, but you did. And really, it all comes down to taking it day by day and idea by idea, and figuring out as you go along, winging it as we do. So in the end, to wrap it up, I would have to say that adding all of these things, the risk, the doubt, the blood, the sweat, the fear, the OCD, without a doubt, that is an integral part, the spark, the reflection, and the grit, gives you a perfect formula where you are confident and self-doubting at the same time, which is where you're always going to be questioning yourself, but at the same time believing in the choices that you make. You're fearless yet terrified, because you don't want to disappoint anybody, you don't want to disappoint yourself or your audience or your speakers. But you just keep on chugging. You're constantly pushing, listening, adjusting, and improving. But most of all, you're always asking yourself the what if and how can we? Thank you.